Hello. Um, Hello, everyone. Thank you for dialing in today. There's been loads of great content and loads of great videos going out on the BITA community page, but this is the first BITAx one that we've done, and we're hoping to host this as a series of events, and that information will be updated on the BITA community website, as well as the BITAx LinkedIn page, where we're constantly putting up any details that we're doing. So a bit about BITAx, for those of you that don't know. We are an organization very much about developing and creating opportunities for young professionals. This event is a bit of a follow-on for a series of events that we started to hold in a pre-COVID-19 world, where we would actually host breakfast seminars, and we would get key speakers on good topics, delivering value for our members. The last couple that we did were mental health awareness, diversity and inclusivity in the workplace, and sustainability. Really, for what we're looking at doing is, over this period, a series of these webinars, to really continue to provide relevant insight for young professionals, for people. And I think I'm really excited for the first one that we've got in our schedule lined up for this week, for this evening. So we have talking about their journey, their business. We've got Ray and Deirdre from Kuldia. It sounds to me like early interactions with with BITA, and feedback from interactions amongst the wider members, and how Kuldia have been placing and interacting with the other members. It just seemed like a very natural fit, and quite aligned to the sort of help that we're trying to give our members. So please do throughout the session today, make a point of putting your questions on the chat, so we've got an opportunity to ask from our speakers today. So I'll hand over for the main part. Very excited to hear a little bit more about the journey they've been through, and good opportunity to learn for the audience today.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. So I guess we should introduce ourselves first of all, and then we'll give you the background to the business, and we'll take you through it. We'll probably take some questions as we go, as Peter says. So we can do some at the end, but certainly if there are things that you pick up as we go, happy to address those as well, to make it as interactive as we possibly can for you, and to help you get as much from, I guess, our learnings as you possibly can. So I'm Ray Wright, so co-founder. My role is as Chief Revenue Officer in the business. Our business is called Kuldia. I'll let Deirdre introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Deirdre McGettrick. I am the co-founder and CEO of Kuldia. Maybe it's worth touching upon the name actually. Kuldia was a pun on our cool idea. That's the first lesson. Nobody gets that. It's a terrible name, if I'm honest about it. Nobody can spell it. Nobody can say it. The amount of calls that we get on, we're like, and how do I pronounce that? So that's sort of, I think, the first lesson that we've learned in business is around your branding, and how important it is that people can say the name, can spell it, that you're not doing anything that's too creative or too quirky out there. So that was one of our first learnings, I think, that I would think about. And it's interesting because we've been on the journey, and we'll go back maybe to the start first off, and then we can sort of touch upon the name and how that's interacted. But we are also an engaged couple. We're meant to be getting married on the 29th of June, so that's looking pretty unlikely. But on the bright side, we have plenty more time then to work on the business, so we can have a bigger party down the line at some stage. The business idea really all started in the apartment that we're in. We bought an apartment back in February 2017. I probably took the lead in terms of furnishing the apartment. I love interior design and was finally fascinated to have a project for myself. I knew exactly what I wanted, the sort of that 3-month period where it goes into the legal black hole and you wonder what they're doing until you get the keys and it's all dotted I's and T's crossed. And in that period, I started looking for furniture. You know what you want. You see it on Pinterest, Instagram, or in your favorite restaurant or hotel, but actually sourcing that product is really frustrating. So what's the issue? I often tell a story, just there's a lot of guys on the call, and some of the girls will maybe be more familiar with this, but Ray goes in to buy a pair of black shoes. He goes into the shop, tries them on, they're a good price, they fit, so he buys them. I go into the same shop, I need a pair of black shoes. I find a pair, they're a good price, try them on, they're a good fit, and I leave. I go into every other shop in the shopping centre to make sure there's not a better pair, at a better price, and a better style before I make my purchasing decision. Now, if you elevate that for, I'm seeing Karen's giving me a thumbs up, you know the drill. If you elevate that for furniture, it's typically a high-priced purchase that you're going to make for your home. There's a really emotive element because it's where you're going to have your first dinner party with your friends. It's where your family are going to come over, or if you've got kids, it's where they're going to play. It's an item that won't be replaced very often. So the typical purchaser for furniture is actually female. And of course, they will spend a lot of time researching, just the same as what I have done. So they go onto Google and they start trying to search for this furniture that they've seen that they want for their home. And what you find is that you have to search individual furniture retailer after furniture retailer. So you're in John Lewis, enter your search criteria until you filter down to your products, then repeat that on Wayfair, on Made, and then you start scratching your head because who are the other retailers? I know these products exist because I've seen them on Pinterest, but where are they if they're not in one of the big guys? And of course, the reason that we only ever see a small subsection of the market is because they've got big advertising budgets. So where are all the small people? Where's all the cool products? Where's all the niche things? Why isn't there a furniture aggregator? That was the question that I used to come home and pose to Ray after a very busy day in the office. And I think where we got to is we were looking at other solutions out there. If you think of Skyscanner, you think of Go Compare, you think of Zoopla, you don't want to just look for the cheapest 3-bed semi-detached house. You want to look for the right one. And that's really where the idea behind the business came from. So once we got to there, I was sort of scratching my head saying, right, there's an idea here. I know there's probably a business idea and a viable business. I've got no idea what to do, literally none. And I suppose that's where maybe Ray came in.
Yeah, and that's where the journey started, guys. So to put it in context, I mean, I think everyone thinks that, creating a business comes from some sort of immaculate conception type scenario where it's not necessarily the case. So in our case, we identified that there was a problem. We were both working in corporate jobs at the time, well paid, doing well, all that kind of stuff, very comfortable. But we sort of knew that there was an opportunity, and we sat on it for a little while. And there was one weekend that we went away, which is in May of 2017. We went down to Dorset, down on the beach, and it was pouring down with rain. So we couldn't really get out in the sunshine. So we went down to the pub down there, and we took down a notepad, and we literally just sketched out what were the problems that we were having, why were they existing, and what other solutions could be paralleled, things like Booking.com, Zoopla, these sorts of platforms, to the furniture market. And that was the genesis of the business. It was as simple as that. Now, it took us about 5 or 6 months to actually take the next step. And that was because we were in that sort of point of limbo where you sort of go, well, we've got this idea, but we're doing pretty well in our career. Should we go for it? Shouldn't we? What should we do? And really the sort of tipping point came from just looking at the opportunity and doing a bit more market research and really understanding that if we put our time and effort into this, one, do we think we're capable by pulling together the resources? But two, is the opportunity, is it scalable? Is there a market? Is it scalable? And I think we've both felt pretty compelled at that point in time to say, yes, there is, and it's worthwhile taking the risk. And that was it, really. From that point, it's you go forward. You have a vision, you have to be clear about it, and once your heart's set on it, I think nothing holds you back. And that's really where we started from. So to sort of put in context the next steps, and we're just going to toggle between Dee and I in terms of those steps and what we were thinking at the time, just to be really open about our sort of process. The next steps were really considering how we went about actually, establishing the business, and particularly how we sort of architected the requirements and the technology, being that it's an online technology business. So the first step was to really go through and map it out, and to map out those sort of, what are the user stories in more detail. So what's the problem we're solving? What are people experiencing? Why don't we go and meet with some people, calibrate the idea with them, talk about their own journeys, and then try and turn that into some kind of journey that someone might experience online. So we did that, and we actually ended up getting my brother just to go through and do some basic sort of wireframing for us. But what we did off the back of the wireframing was we started to research, well, how can we build this technically? And we sort of built that back into an RFP, so a request for proposal. And we took the wireframes that my brother built and our specification, and then we took that to market. And we basically went to a bunch of very technical companies, agencies, and we said, look, this is what our vision is. This is where we want to go. This is what we would like you to build for us. But in that process, we were looking for them to also provide insight to us. So I guess, one of the first learnings was you only know what you know. So leaning on the right sort of channels is important, and asking the right questions. And that was just on the technical side of the business. There was a whole range of things that we wanted to know about. Everything from structuring a business to how do you set up your accounting systems, all that kind of stuff. But that's really where we started. We thought, well, point one probably has to be, let's put our own money into it. So let's work out what our runway is for our own money, how much we're prepared to put in. Let's look at what we get back from these RFPs, and then let's make a decision around the direction we take and how we sort of go about it from there. So that's the choice that we took. And then what we needed to do on the back of it was create a functional sort of wireframe that we could go out and start selling to retailers. So before we had anything to launch in market, we realized we had no business unless retailers actually acknowledged the problem as well. So what we did was we put together a sort of list of what we saw as problems and challenges in the market and feedback that we had from consumers or friends of ours. And we took that to the retailers themselves. And obviously within this process, we developed our brand, as Dee said. Don't know if we got 100% right, but we developed that. But what we did was we at least created something that we could take to market and put in front of retailers. And that was quite an interesting experience where in our first 12 months, we managed to sign 26 retailers. Coming between sort of when we really started that process, it was probably April time of 2018, up until Christmas, we only managed to sign 8. So our success rate was relatively low, but we started to get some bites. We got really fast acceleration coming into the beginning of 2019, particularly as our product started to take shape and we could show them something really functional that was basically live. And then we launched in February of 2019. And just to put a summary on that before I pass back over to Dee about some of the other elements of the journey, we sort of moved from 26 retailers when we launched in February of 2019 through to 103 retailers now. So we actually were on 96 by the end of last year. So we managed to sign 70 after we had gone out there. But we had managed to sort of craft our story and understand the pain points to quite a fair level of detail. And that just allowed us to hone the value proposition, which has been super important for us. And it probably leads in quite nicely to how we sort of crafted our value proposition for investors and what we decided to do around testing the business as well.
Yeah, so what we did once we launched in February 2019, is we tried to see, right, we have this version of the website of our product that we're going to launch. The question was, is there a viable business model there? So we're sort of a two-sided marketplace. So we needed to get retailers, which we've now signed over 100. So that bit is fairly ticked. And we needed to get consumers onto the site. Not only did we need to get consumers onto the site, but we needed them clicking through onto the furniture retailers and converting to sale, because that's our business model. That's how we get paid. We do not sell furniture on the website ourselves. We link consumers through to the furniture retailer site and they purchase from them. So the furniture retailer is in charge of returns, purchase, customer service, delivery, everything like that. So in the simplest way, you can think of it maybe a little bit like Skyscanner. You go on there, you find the flight that you want, and then you're saying, I'm going with BA. Then you actually click out onto the BA website and you purchase from them. So we're very much the same as that in terms of our operating model. So at the simplest level, and simplicity is one of our values, what we wanted to do with the business was see if there was a viable business model on the back of having launched in February 2019. So we ran the website for a couple of months. We were signing retailers all the time. And we were getting great traction for consumers, great feedback in terms of, this is amazing. Oh my God, if only that existed last month. I was trying to find a dining table with the missus and it was horrible. So it was really encouraging to get all that. So we said, great, but now how are we going to take the business to the next level? And at this stage, I think Ray was about maybe 18 months without taking any salary. I left, we actually phased that in terms of how we left our jobs. So we decided that Ray would leave first, and then I left about 14 months afterwards, so keeping a salary coming in the early days. So we decided that we would go out and try and raise some financing. And this was a very interesting journey. My background is raising debt for companies. I've raised 20 billion for Reckitt Benckiser when they were buying Mead Johnson as an acquisition. I've raised bonds for companies like Ocado, companies like Zoopla, House of Fraser. But asking people to put their own hand into their pocket to support our business was a very, very different thing to asking institutional people, so pension funds and hedge funds, to invest in a bond in a big corporation. And that journey really has been fascinating because a lot of the people that we spoke to are actually entrepreneurs themselves. They've built businesses, so there's no bullshitting them really. I said one of the feedback that we got was around the name. They all hated it. It was pretty much unanimous. So we are changing the name. We have a new name that is coming at the end of this month. I can't say it just yet, but wait for the big reveal. But it's very much does what it says on the tin: intuitive, spellable, all of those characteristics that we sort of missed at the very beginning. So Ray, I don't know if you want to talk about the financing bit for a second, because you have a different perspective given that you came with it from fresh eyes.
Yeah. Well, I suppose there were a couple of elements that we wanted to establish before we went out and actually looked to raise money. And this is probably an interesting learning for people. So the first thing is that we had to establish a business model. So we really worked on establishing an operational model. So we actually, in the early days, we put something together, but it was very nascent. There was no real structure around it or anything that was really tangible. But after we had been running the business for 6 months, so we went out and started looking at raising in August of 2019. And we actually had some tangibility to our business model. So we could actually see engagement with the product. We could see click-through rates. We could see average time to purchase. And it started to help us hone in on what are the core metrics that will drive this business forward, and how can we clearly demonstrate to investors where profitability might come from in the future, where scale is going to come from, and how we actually can get a foothold in the market. Because that's what investors want to know ultimately is, how are you going to do it? What's it look like? What's your model? Talk us through it. And if you can keep it simple, investors tend to buy into it. So we had the insight to be able to go and do that. The other thing that we really wanted to focus on as well is, okay, so if we are going to raise money, well, what are we going to spend that money on? So, and the investors really want to know that, so they want to know, okay, great. So if I give you 200 grand, what are you going to do with that 200 grand? So we basically took the model and said, look, there are 3 things here that effectively we want to invest in with your money that we think we can scale based on what we can see. The first thing is people. So we need people to grow this thing. It's just D and I at the moment. We have agencies working with us, helping to build the product. That's easier because they're working on more of a freelance basis. But we actually need people, because what you need is you need buy-in and you need focus, and you're never going to get that by working solely with third parties. So we need people, and we need people in core seats. So we needed a CTO, we needed a head of marketing. We wanted a very technical SEO person on board who would understand what meta search means online. Someone who's worked with gambling agencies, companies like Skyscanner. They understand that element of how our business works. And we need those people to work alongside us, 1, to advise, but also 2, to own those elements of the business so we can be super focused. The second thing was technology. So the CTO would be playing a key role in that, but we needed to make the right investments in technology. One of the core investments was making sure we're using the right tools and systems to operate our business in a lean way. But the other thing that we really wanted to focus on was, well, what tech stack should we be building on? So what are the opportunities that we're focused on there? And how is that technology going to enable us? One of the biggest things behind our business, guys, which probably sits for most businesses, is data as well. And the technology would enable us to actually capture and use data in a meaningful way. So we know as a business that actually our vision is solving this problem for consumers, but actually underneath the surface, we're a massive data play as a business, because your insights will help you accelerate your model forward. And also those insights actually turn into powerful insights that you can sell back to market it monetize in other ways. So we really wanted to explore that, and taking on investment and being able to build the right tech to enable us to capture that was important. So there are those two elements. And then the final piece is marketing, of course. So you're nowhere without a brand, and we're very, very cognizant of that. So what we've tried not to do over the journey is over-engineer our product without actually having a brand in market as well. So we've been very focused on developing the brand too, because what we need to do now is make sure that really lands strongly and becomes the recognized place in market. So we're focused on those three things. And that's really where we spend our time and effort in honing our message with the investors. Probably one thing that I think would be useful for anyone that is looking to start a business and is thinking about how they would raise money is that we started to look into how did other successful startups go about raising in the early days. And one of the things that we learned from the guys at Airbnb is that before they went to any meaningful investor, what they did was they practiced. So they contacted friends, family, people they knew who maybe had invested in other businesses, put together their pitch deck, and actually practiced it with people. So we spent about 6 weeks going out and doing practice pitches before we went to anybody of any sort of significance on the investment front, which Steve can talk about how we mapped that in a minute. But we thought that was super important because, one, we wanted to be sure that our message was clear. We also wanted to be sure that our model made sense and that people could see value in it. And the third thing that we wanted to do was just look at how we came across. So how did people receive us as founders? Are we credible people? Do they believe us? And that kind of thing. So we wanted to get that feedback without people feeling like they needed to invest. So we did run that for a period of 6 weeks. We did it pretty intensely, took all the feedback, recalibrated our presentation deck. And then once we were comfortable with that, that's when we went to market to begin to raise.
Great. Can I just ask something on that? So at that moment in time, it sounds like, developing the tech and the marketing skills and, putting a piece together about how that would all, why that's all required and what that would do. But was it not quite tough at the time to consider, effectively, a lot of this is contingent on you getting an investment, which, ultimately you didn't know how much you were going to get. So did you not find there were varying, this would be nice to have, but this is what we really need? Or if we don't get that, were there not added variables at that moment in time where you really didn't know, well, what if we don't get anything? Or what if we get this much? How did you guys manage that?
Yeah, good question, actually. Do you want to answer it? Or?
I think it's all about how much you back yourself, Peter. It's a really interesting question, and there's a little bit of timing in it as well. I do feel sorry for people that are sort of out at the moment given coronavirus, and a lot of investors have closed their wallets. I think we were lucky to be able to close all that ahead of this uncertainty. But I think ultimately we were either raising money or we weren't, and if we weren't, the business wasn't going to go anyplace. But you have to ask yourself, why is that? Maybe we're blindsided to the fact that it's not viable. So you're trying to convince other people that it is. You would never leave your job, both of us, to go after something unless we didn't believe that we could do it with every single bone in our body. And that's very much what we brought into investors. But what I would say is that, when you go out and you meet investors, it won't be for everyone. There's a lot of people that, not being stereotypical against guys, but they don't live the frustration of that shop. So some of them struggle to understand why this solution was important, and you have to sort of educate people along with that. You won't convince everyone, and you've just got to be very cognizant of the fact that you're going to get a lot of rejection.
Probably another point to touch on your question as well, Peter, was we actually built 3 models. So in going through that whole practicing, getting ourselves geared up for the investment raise, and one other thing to mention to everyone as well is we actually got ourselves involved in an accelerator. The accelerator was called Set Squared, which is an initiative between Surrey, Plymouth, Bristol, and Bath universities. And that accelerator actually helped us really frame what our customer looked like, what our value proposition looked like as well. But what we did in that process too was we looked at various models, and we looked at where we wanted to scale to and where we wanted to reach. And then, if we didn't raise that amount of money, so we were looking at, okay, if we raised 2 million, how far could that take us? If we raise 1 million, how far could that take us? If we raise 500,000, how far could that take us? And what course of action would we need to take? So we tried to play it out in various scenarios to sort of look at what our scalability would be, but also to say, look, these could be quite realistic scenarios that we could be facing. So, you know, if we're in scenario one, do you take somebody's money? Or, you know, you need to be really cognizant of the fact that, you know, you are asking people to make an investment very much in you at an early stage in a business. So no matter how convincing you are, they're ultimately investing in you. So we just wanted to play that out and model it when it came to what that looked like. And probably just to touch on the process as well around raising the investment, and to Deirdre's point, like, it wasn't straightforward. So it was relatively quick for us, but you've got to burn the midnight oil, and you've got to meet people, and you've got to keep networking, and you've got to keep finding new people and keep finding new contacts. And like, we were having dinners with people, sitting with them, having a bottle of red wine till midnight. And then at 6:30 a.m., you'd be at a cafe, you know, meeting with someone else before work, you know, to take them through it. So you literally, that's the game you've got to play. You know, you've got to get out there. You've got to be prepared to work around people's schedules, and you've just got to keep going at it. And it's not easy. It's not for everyone. But you know, I guess, you know, if you really feel passionately about it, that's the game you're going to play if you're going to raise money for your business. So that's probably a bit about our journey on that side of things. Maybe you want to touch on how we structured the round as well, and some of the things that we focused on, SEIS, CIS, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say as a first thing, like, fundraising is a distraction. You know, it takes you away from actually running and growing your business. And that's why we very much were trying to do it before and after work, trying to keep, you know, the lights on and keep everything going. And I think that's very much reflected with every person that's been through fundraising that I've spoken to. There is government supports out there to help you to try and get investment, or to try and help investors to invest in startups that are, you know, more risky, frankly, and that banks wouldn't lend to. So there's two programs. One is called SEIS, and the other is called EIS. It's a follow-on. But basically what it is that if you're an investor, and I'll just use SEIS as an example, if you invest £100 into a company like a startup like us, the government will give you 50% of your tax back. So of that £100, really your capital at risk is only costing you £50. If the company goes gangbusters and turns into the next Airbnb, all of your profit tax-free. So pretty big incentive. And on the downside, if it goes bust, you get your marginal tax rate back on the capital that's at risk. So you put in 100, you've already got 50 back, so the 50 is what's still at risk. If that company goes back, assuming you're a higher rate taxpayer at 45%, you'll get 45% of that 50 back. So really the risk parameters are very low. And if you've got high net worth individuals, you know, a lot of them use this in investing because it's a great tax incentive for them.
Yeah. So you can play that to your advantage, and certainly it was very advantageous for us, as it is for a lot of early stage businesses. Depends on what business you're in as well. In ours, scaling tech, scaling marketing requires big investment. Other businesses can grow in a more linear way and can generate cash where you don't need to raise investment. So it depends on your objectives on that side of things. But for us, that was critical to how we actually get in market and scale. The other thing to probably touch on that side is the profile of your investor. So some people are very quick just to jump at money just because money is there. And we were really cognizant of the fact that, you know, doing that might not necessarily be the best thing for your business. You might have the wrong people on the bus. And really what you need to do is focus on smart money. So we very much profiled the type of investor that we were looking for. Yes, we had a lot of introductions from people, that kind of thing. If we sat down with someone, we would try and work out who they were, you know, what their background was, what were the portfolio of businesses they invested in, how successful were they, how willing were these people to help out businesses were they investing in. So we were really trying to get under the skin of it. So it almost becomes like an interview with an investor where they're trying to work you out and you're trying to work them out. And it's either a yes or no at the end of it, hypothetically. It's not quite as black and white as that, but you know what I mean. So that's a really important part. And we were very focused on smart money so we could build an investor community around the business that would offer us advice, could give us steer, which our investors have been great so far on that. But also we were looking at follow-on investment as well. So how could we set up a structure that would allow us to have people that would anchor a follow-up round if we wanted to continue to scale, which we do. So we very much structured around that as well, because we just felt like it was important to have the right people on the bus. And you hear horror stories about how investors don't back businesses, particularly in times like these, and they sink. And we wanted to have the right people who, you know, would have our back. And we feel like we've got that. Time will tell, but we do feel like we've got that right now. So that's a bit on the investment. Maybe it's worthwhile talking about our hiring plan as well and setting out our values.
Yeah. One thing I would say lastly on the investment is that it's all good and well going out and saying, oh, you only want to choose smart money and, you know, you're interviewing them. At the end of the day, the balance of power is more so in the investors' hands. At the end of the day, if you're trying to get a business, you need the money. And if there's only one person giving it to you, you would probably have to go for that. And that's the right thing to do regardless. So, you know, I will say it's all grand and dandy us sitting here and saying, oh, so we chose the best investors and that. I do think we were extremely lucky. We've got 5 like multimillionaires who have invested. They've grown businesses from scratch themselves. One guy sold his business for 800 million. Another guy is his business listed for over $1 billion. They started them from nothing. And one thing that I do sort of look back on and I think, why did they invest in us? And I really think it's because they probably saw something in us that reminded them of themselves. They saw a passion or they saw the determination. Because at the end of the day, anyone can have a good idea, but getting that idea from your head to down on paper to a business that's up and running is very different skill sets. And what they really want to know is that when the chips are down, you'll keep fighting and you'll keep going for it. And until every avenue is exhausted, you're going to keep pushing and trying. So I think that's really important to get across when you are, you know, talking to investors or people like that, because they want to know you've invested, that you've got some skin in the game as well. So that's really important. So I'm actually a little bit conscious on time. Before I go into hiring, I don't know if you want to maybe open it up to questions more so in terms of what's relevant for people on the call, because we can literally talk for hours. We bore our friends regularly.
Maybe we'll open up to some questions.
Pete's talking away on mute.
You're talking on mute, Peter. We said that before the call.
You said you weren't going to do this.
So yeah, we've actually we've had a couple come through, and I think sort of one that I think was sort of particularly interesting is really talking about you know, the myth, you know, that if you start your own business and immediately sort of starting to make lots of money. I mean, would you say, you know, sort of comments on that, and I mean, but also to contrast that with sort of evidence around that the average startup might make profit in year 3. I mean, how does that sort of contrast with your journeys, your predictions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it very much varies on the business model. So if you're doing something like consultancy, you will start to make money and make profit probably in day 1 or year 1. What I would say to most people, if you're starting up a business similar to ours, is you should expect 3 years of runway where you're not going to make that much money and where you're going to have to do, you know, a hell of a lot of hard work. So be prepared to give up weekends, be prepared to give up evenings, mornings. That's what it requires. And, you know, if you don't really want to do that, then, you know, maybe question that. You know, it's interesting when you look at startups now versus maybe 10 years ago or the last 10 years. I think that there was a big push. There was a lot of money. Things were good in the market, and it was all about scale at what cost. And you've seen that from SoftBank's investments into WeWork as an example. You know, if you look at a company like Airbnb, they started in 2002. They're still not profitable. So I think there will be a real shift now. I think investors are looking at profitability because there's only so long that you can keep getting investors to put in more money. And I think that you're going to see a lot of startups that are, you know, series B, C, D, that maybe the investors will stop giving the money and they might go to the floor at the moment. And I think that's one of the things as well, that you see a lot of startups that actually grow out of recessions because you have to be more creative and you have to bring in profitability sooner. But, you know, it depends on the business, as you've seen. If you look at Wayfair, you know, they're nearly 20 years without making a profit. So it depends what you're going for.
Yeah. And it probably on that, it depends on your model as well. So, you know, in our market, because it's all about scale and you're scaling the brand, you know, what you're actually looking at is you're looking at your cost of acquisition of customers, and you're looking at lifetime value. So there are a couple of core metrics there that we focus on. So we just look at it from an arbitrage perspective effectively. So we're not looking at the underlying profitability of the business per se, because we just need to control our expenditure across different lines. But we are looking at it and saying, can we control cost of acquisition and can we drive lifetime value of customer? And then what it means is that as you scale, you know what margins you got to play with, but also you might get to a point where you scale your technology so much that you don't need to keep investing at the same rate. And then all of a sudden you're fattening up, you know, what you're putting into your bottom line there. So you know, you probably need just to understand those scalable factors about your business. If you're a consultancy, then obviously your business is purely contingent on your time. So what's your hourly rate? What's your output versus the amount of time that you've got? And you just look at your returns, where in our instance, it's just what does the model actually look like? And a lot of investors, particularly in this stage, won't look for profitability. What they'll look for is that model as their core metric as to why they invest. Now, what we decide to push towards is entirely up to us, and it comes down to what kind of business are you trying to scale it in what market as well. So, like Dee said, you know, companies like Wayfair, Airbnb have never been about profitability. Salesforce is another one. They've been about scale, scale, scale. So you probably need to make that decision within your own business as well as to what are you going for with this business, and what are your end goals? Are you focused on, you know, an exit, which, by the way, people shouldn't be stringently focused on an exit. I think you should have an eye on it, but not make that your obsession. But are you focused on an exit in a period of time, or are you focused on having a business for 20 or 30 years that you want to run and be profitable and to pay dividends? And Peter, that probably plays into what your objective should be around when you reach profitability or what you do on that side of things. Happy to take another question. Unmute.
So yeah, just we've had another question just coming through. I suppose really just in regard to your product itself, in terms of how do you guys prevent sort of bigger brands, you know, tracking, you know, your best-selling products, you know, as a more newer player in the market, and, you know, maybe engaging with some of them directly and cutting, you know, putting some of your earnings at risk.
So I suppose the first thing is that we don't actually sell the products on our site. So how they would track actually sales of competitors is sort of the same as what they would have always done.
So we drive the traffic through to the retailers, and the purchase is actually confirmed on the retailer side. It's an interesting question though, in terms of, well, how will the market view us? So I think that was one of the things that we were questioning in the early days, is would companies like Made.com, would companies like Airbnb, John Lewis, would companies like Heels, for example, would they buy into our value proposition, and would they be prepared to operate with a business like us? Now, inevitably, they will, if we continue to scale at the rate that we are, they probably will look at us and say, well, what is it about them? But we do have a pretty unique USP in that we're covering the market, and we're trying to solidify our position as a real value add for them so that they don't look elsewhere. Our actual objective around it, Peter, is quite different. Our objective around it is to grow ourselves to a point where our market insights are so credible and so large that actually those companies are coming to us asking about market insights, and we can share those learnings with them. So that's where we would like to get to as a business in the future. But look, it may be that they do look at how we operate, maybe more on the marketing side, like what's our go-to-market? How are we structuring our content? You know, are we doing any creative things? Like, you know, I think it's probably a pretty well-known fact for anyone that shop for furniture that, you know, furniture retailers wouldn't be the most innovative marketers out there if you compare them to other industries. So obviously we're coming at our content strategy from a different angle because our value proposition is different. So I think if they were researching us, they would be probably looking at how we go to market and the way that we market ourselves by and large.
Okay. And just something else that's come through, and I suppose, you know, framing this for the audience that we have on today, sort of knowing what you know now, if somebody's, you know, sitting on an idea that they've got that strong sense of belief, you know, about, but, you know, they haven't sort of quite taken that plunge to work out if it is a strong enough business idea to take that first step. What advice would you give to them, knowing what you know now?
So I would say the first thing is validate the idea. So you think it's a great idea. Are you the target marketer who is the target market? And go and talk to them. And you can say, you know, hypothetically, would you use this type of a service if it existed? The other thing about that is that, because we've done a lot of consumer research, just take everything with a pinch of salt as well. Because if you ask somebody, would this service be useful? Everybody will say yes. But then if you sort of bring them onto another website and you tell them, right, use this website, and did you know that this function exists? Oh yeah, but I don't use that. All right, but you're saying it's a must on my website. Well, why is that? And then they're like, oh yeah, maybe I wouldn't use it. So you've got to sort of ask them questions without putting words into their mouth, but really try and get out what they think, and is that the reality of how they function and how they actually act. So that's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, what are your skills for making that idea come to fruition, and where are your skill gaps and where do you need help? I think it's pretty invaluable to have a co-founder, really try and get somebody that you trust and that has got a different skill set, because then you've always got somebody who, can pick you up when you're down and vice versa, because it's really tough. And if you were just up the top on your own, I imagine it would actually be quite lonely. And from speaking to other entrepreneurs who are going solo, it is a constant thing that they actually feed back and they try and get involved in entrepreneur networks, but it can be lonely up there. So having somebody who understands all the challenges and somebody to bounce ideas off, I would say that's two of the main things. And then lastly, just have a think about yourself. Why do you want to go do it? And are you willing to put the work in? So like, I can remember last summer, my friends were all down in Brighton on the beach. It was a bank holiday and they were sending me messages and it looked amazing. And we were here in the apartment working and I didn't mind. Now, if I was working still in the investment bank and I got that, I'd be like, God, I hate my job. I can't believe I have to work and they're out having fun. So are you willing to give that up? Are you willing to give up going to the restaurants, staying in a nice hotel for that period of time when you're building it? And, frankly, it's a little bit addictive. You don't want to do anything else. We just want to work because we want it to succeed so badly. So what is that motivation sort of behind you? I'd be lying if I said money wasn't a factor, but it's not our key driver. Well, it's certainly not mine. I shouldn't speak for Ray, although sometimes I do. My key motivation and my key factor is really like, I really believe that I can do this. I believe I can set up a company, and I'd be really disappointed with myself if I just stuck in a job that's a corporate job working for somebody else when I know I could achieve more. So that's probably my driver.
One other thing I'd probably say on the back of that, just coming back to the whole, like, how would you validate it and how would you go around it? So one of the things that we did in the early days was we got together different groups of friends and even extended colleagues that we had met through our careers. And we actually organized focus group dinners. And so we put together a list of, say, 10 or 20 talking points, organized a dinner. So a dinner in Clapham, a dinner in North London, got these people along and then asked them questions, went through it, got people to feedback on their experiences with different things, got them to think about it beforehand. And actually, as an exercise that probably cost us £400, I suppose, to validate the idea, like, it gave us a huge amount of insight on what people were thinking, what they were experiencing, and that kind of thing. And people were prepared to go at the time, particularly if you throw in a couple of pints, couple of glasses of wine and a bit of food, people will give you the time. So that was really valuable for us. So, very small outlay for huge validation of things that we should focus on. And they were probably some good choices that we made at that point in time.
Okay. And just another question, I'm conscious probably not to get too technical, but obviously there are people here at the moment that are, that have got businesses and running businesses, and a comment, sort of questions being asked that obviously with your model, it's highly reliant on attracting people, to your site. We've had a question asking really about, some of the more efficient ways of attracting traffic to the website, for current business owners.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, God, there's the million, maybe $1 billion question. I mean, I don't know. There are different ways to approach it. So there are growth hacks. There's growing it organically. There's paid investment. So you've got to make decisions around what the right way is to go about it. Certainly from our perspective, we've been working very hard on the strategy of how we approach it. Two key investments that we think are crucial for our business that we've been making and that we feel very strongly will hold us in good stead for the longer term. One, investing very heavily in SEO and technical structure behind the site to allow us to rank organically for what we do. We're in a hyper competitive market, but there are opportunities, and where most companies fall short is they don't believe in this. So that they believe in is constant paid or always on advertising. And most companies that try that as a strategy come a cropper. There's obviously a place for it, absolutely, but you have to do it intelligently. So we've been very, very focused on SEO and organic traffic. And then also one of our most recent sort of investments was bringing on a PR manager within the business and focusing on PR. So there are a lot of good channels to market through effective PR. So we're very, very invested in that as well. So that will help us grow the brand. And ultimately our objective is to grow brand saliency and searchability on our platform. And that's what we're very, very focused on. And that will negate the need to constantly spend on advertising, as you see some companies do. But you need to have a broader mix. There's no like silver bullet to say, if you do this, you will definitely get success. You've just got to make your choices about where that scale comes from in your own eyes and invest in that. Some companies rely on networking, for example. You know, if you're a B2B company, you might have a direct to market proposition with telemarketers. It's different for every business, but for us, there were a couple of core things that we earmarked.
So it's all around who is your customer that you're trying to target and where are they? That's the basic question. Bring everything back to simplicity. You don't need to overcomplicate it.
Okay, great. Well, look, I'm conscious of sort of time. I mean, I think we could have gone on for a lot longer. It's, really, really great insight for the audience today. And, I'd like to thank, you, Ray, Deirdre, for your time today and being able to share that story and take questions from the group, and also, sort of fellow sort of board members and Paul Edmonds for helping put together today. And I just sort of like to hand over to Paul Whitnell now for some closing remarks.
Well, firstly, I've come off 3 calls today. So if there's a terminology of Zoom lag, I've got it. I've been in America, I've been in Scotland, and I'm here now. So my son is also calling me a boomer all the time. So I need someone to explain what that's all about. But I think one of the things that came out loud and clear in terms of this session is the personality in the business. Dee and Ray, I love you to bits, you know that since I've met you, but the personality of your business is bouncing out as well. And I think that's really, really important in terms of identifying that personality, which you do very, very well. And that then, of course, jumps all over your brand and it helps that grow as well. But the other thing I've really enjoyed is how you identified the correlation of where BITA can actually play a part in your business. And, that helps us as much as it helps the membership. And I think that's a lesson as well that people can learn, is when you actually have a clear identity of where you're going and your pathway and your journey and how you can actually utilize an organization like BITA. It makes it very adventurous for us to help you and watch you grow, because what your business is very current. It's very alive. It's very passionate. And we certainly are enjoying the journey we're going on with you at the moment. So, I'd like people to kind of reflect on that in terms of, those types of thoughts, that type of thinking that you aspire to there is very important to go into that depth and rather than just racing on with a vision. There's a lot more to it than that. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And thank you, Peter, Ryan, BITAx. It's wonderful to see you back on this platform. This platform is very precious for us at the moment because it was our way of identifying with the BITA community that we are still very much alive and vibrant and well, which we've shown over the last couple of weeks. So thank you all for joining us, and hopefully fairly soon we'll be back with a pint in our hands because I'm gasping for one, So take care and keep well.
Hello.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Hurry
guys.
up. They want to order food.
Thank you, guys.
Bye,
Much
everyone.
appreciated. Appreciate everyone's time.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Well done. Cheers, all.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you.
I said they want to order food.
Thank you. Best of luck.
Who's ordering the food?
Can you order me a pizza?
I'll have a burger.
A Zoom pizza. Lovely. See you, everyone. Well done.
Well done, guys.
Well done, everyone.